Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I want to talk to you about a phenomenon. How Amazon became the latest classical discographic garbage dump. Because that's what it is. That's what the classical record industry is. It's a garbage dump. It's unbelievable what a mess the thing is. And everybody who tries to make sense of it gets screwed. That's the bottom line. By an industry that represents 3 or 4% max of the market for recorded music, but which made God knows what, 50, 60% of the physical product. Does that make any sense? It never did. It never can. Now, let's go back in history a little bit, if you will. Back when I was a kid, there were record stores. They were buildings, and in those buildings, they had recordings, and they had the popular music section, and then usually somewhere in the back, there was the classical music section. It was smaller, it was walled off, and the people who were there sometimes looked kind of creepy, you know what I mean? They were the ones who came out of the woodwork once in a while, and to indulge their habit. And I used to hang out back there. Scary though it sometimes was, blowing the dust off of the bins that few people tackled. Oh my God, what a mess. But, there was a separate section, and it usually was reasonably representative in the larger record stores. In New Haven, that record store was Cutler's. Cutler's was fabulous. It really was. And it had these crazy, eccentric classical music salespeople. And if they were smart, the way they organized their classical section was by label and catalog number. So you could look through sideways. If they were in a wall, they were like this, and you would look through the numbers and see what each label had available, and you could make your selections. It was a lot of stuff, but it was manageable. And if you wanted to just do basic repertoire, if you were a smaller store, you were dealing with a more limited market, it wasn't too hard to just go buy the 4 or 5 major labels and take their stuff by their most famous artists. You could make a nice little selection of what was out. Well, then the explosion of classical recording happened. Major labels started recording everything, duplicating everything. Independent labels existed. They started doing crap loads of rare repertoire. This was fabulous. Fabulous for us collectors. It was a disaster economically because the market for this stuff was a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. Of that 4%, it was a 200th of that 4% that would be interested in some of this stuff, but they made it. And the retailers, feeling an obligation to their industry, said, well, we have to find a way to sell this stuff. So what did they do? They built classical annexes for just classical music, usually in the most inexpensive part of whatever thing they were renting, because the rent was going to be far greater than their sales turnover ever could possibly justify, right? So you had these big stores whose like Tower Records, and there were others, Rainbow Records, and their concept was to sell everything the industry had. But the industry blew them up because the industry made so much more stuff than they could possibly store. I mean, there just wasn't room. There wasn't physical space for this stuff. Not only that, even if there had been physical space, the turnover, the amount of sales per square foot of space that they rented was so low that they could never justify rent in major cities, in nice places. Because let's face it, even though classical people might go to the back of the store and blow the dust and cobwebs off of the stuff they were looking for, they were not going to go to East Podunk, next to the railroad tracks to indulge their habit or drive 400 miles. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. There were some places that kind of specialized in used things like that, like the Princeton Record Exchange, but they made their living on mail order by publishing catalogs, the Berkshire Record Outlet, which is still around, but which distributes its stuff through Albany Records. It's no longer even a physical space that you could go to. I mean, it's really fascinating how this all moved. The movement away from physical space was symptomatic. It's part of the same process that's leading to downloading and streaming. The impossibility of keeping physical product available for distribution. It really is a mess. So this is what's going on in the industry. And everyone who tried to do it, Borders, remember Borders? Combinations book and record store. Oh, that was a double whammy. Oh my God, because the publishing industry was doing just what the classical music industry and the record industry was doing, just tossing out scads of stuff and paying no attention to creating sensible, well-curated catalogs that they could market and sell and create an audience for. Because remember, it was the industry's obligation to sell what they made, and in tandem with the retailers. But nobody did that, certainly not for classical music, because again, the expense would never be justified by the actual sales, or at least the way they did it. That's the way it was going to happen. So all of these things, they all blew themselves up. They're all dead and gone and buried in a mess, a total mess. The internet provided a brief salvation for some of these things because they allowed them to sell online by mail order to increase the amount of their reach, their audience, rather than having people having to actually go into the physical shop. However, that brings us to Amazon. Now, when Amazon got started, you may recall, Amazon was a bookseller initially, and then they decided to do music. And when they decided to do music, they also wanted to sell everything, because online, all you need was one big central warehouse for everything. I mean, the fact that big central warehouse had to be like the size of Texas to store all that crap is another issue. But that was the theory. And they could do it for a while. They did it. They were dedicated to books and music. And they organized their books and music and sold them very, very well. I know this because I was involved. I was involved in the initial Amazon classical music startup. I was hired to write capsule reviews of the entire classical music catalog, me and a bunch of other critics. We all did it, and it was fun. For an entire summer, I wrote, I don't know, several thousand of these things, and they paid top dollar, and I made a lot of money in like 2 months. It made like 50 or 60 grand. It was fantastic. And they had no idea what they were getting into, and they asked me to do it, I have to confess, because they said, just do as many as you can. We'll take them. Well, I mean, that's like, feeding blood to a shark. You know what I mean? I just sat there all summer and banged them out, dozens and dozens and dozens every day for months, faster than they could digest them. Oh God, it was fun, because they were like 150 word, couple line things. And those are still there. Some of them are still on the product pages on Amazon. You can find them. But I had a big fight with Amazon over it. I mean, philosophical fight. I didn't fight with them like physically, but I got very upset. Why? Because they also bought the Gramophone online catalog, which they proceeded to include along with the reviews that they'd commissioned, which was terrible thing to do. First of all, they never got the stuff up correctly, and so there were like pieces of reviews and things missing, and it looked awful. But second of all, then they decided, of course, they were going to do customer comments. Now, you and I comment, right? We comment because that's what this medium is for. I am completely opposed to comments, customer comments, when it comes to retail sales or professionally commissioned reviews. Why? Because there's a difference. Quite simply, yes, at the end of the day, an opinion is just an opinion, but a professional critic has to work along certain lines. We're talking about discographies. We're working from a different knowledge base, and we're held to a different standard. At least I thought I was, or I try to be. And so I said to them, look, you hired us to do all of these reviews to sell this product. Why are you going to let us do that and then let some schmo who may hate the critic or hate the performer or hate the performance legitimately take the professional piece of work that you commissioned, and right below it you're going to say, oh, so-and-so's an asshole, I hate it, this is a piece of crap. Well, that's exactly what happened, of course, which meant that at the end of the day, the recommendations count for nothing. They're worthless. They're useless. Everything contradicts everything, and you wind up with nothing. That just annoyed the Jesus out of me, I have to say, and it still does. And that's why at classicstoday.com we don't have comments. We don't have reader comments because we are offering a product. That product reflects our opinion. You could take it or leave it, but we don't care about yours. Go do your own website. Here, I care about yours because we're having a conversation. Get the difference? So anyway, that was one thing that, to my mind, spelt the doom of the Amazon Classical project, because you need to curate. You need to focus. You need to sell. You need to get behind what you're promoting. It can't just be a free-for-all. So there was that. Now, theoretically, there was nothing preventing Amazon from selling everything. And indeed, technically, they still do. But the industry itself went down the crapper and started deleting things, and things went crazy, which meant that the catalog is just a mess. You don't know what's in print. You don't know what's out of print. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know. And the pricing went nuts. And you know this. You talk about it all the time. If you do a search for something on Amazon, and this is what motivated this particular rant, I just did a video. Actually, it's running today. But if this is the year 2786, that doesn't mean anything. So, but what I'm saying is I did a video. The video was a fabulous concert program where I was talking about the Shchedrin Concerti for Orchestra, and I wanted to see what was available because I always check these things out. I hate making recommendations of things you can't find. And there used to be plenty of discs of the Shchedrin Concerti for Orchestra. Well, I went and looked on Amazon, and if you put in Shchedrin, you're as likely to get a vacuum cleaner as a recommended thing as you are anything by Shchedrin. I mean, you get all this junk shows up. Their search engine has totally gone down the tubes in terms of the specificity of the classical music world. I mean, how many Shchedrin vacuum cleaners are there? Maybe there's a line of toasters. I don't know. Or toilet paper. It's insane. But let's assume you find a composer and the stuff shows up and you see all of this crap is out of print. I mean, the discs show up. You find them, but you can't get them. It also says out of print, currently out of print, currently out of print, blah blah blah. So or they say it's pending. They're ordering it and they may get it. Yeah, right. Never. Or you could get it from a third-party seller. Maybe the seller is a sailor. From a third-party vendor, and it costs $7,386.12, and shipping is $45.18, and it's coming from, I don't know where, Patagonia. I mean, it's a complete, total garbage dump. There's no organization, anything. And why? Why? Because stuff got deleted, stuff got issued. The industry itself is a wreck. The Amazon website is a wreck. They've been blown up again in the attempt to sell classical music. And I have less patience with this particular explosion because there's really no excuse for it, because it's all in the digibits somewhere. All they need to do is organize their searches and make sure that they have access to the product. But at the end of the day, what they need is someone, a human being, to say, this is what the classical catalog ought to be, and this is what we have to make sure is available so that people can find things. And they haven't done that. They did initially. There was a big classical, sort of group of people. But again, that cost money. You had to hire people. They had to organize it. They did organize it. Then they got rid of them. And now it's all a big garbage dump. So there you are. And now we understand, I think, why everything is moving towards streaming audio. And even the streaming people are having the same problem. There's too much stuff. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it sounds like. They don't know how to organize it. They don't know who their audience is or how to reach them. It's really kind of interesting, isn't it? Maybe someday somebody will figure it out. I don't know. I don't know how possible it is, given all the stuff. My theory, frankly, would be to designate a core repertoire, then subsidiary repertoires in each major category, or symphonic music, Baroque music, whatever, however you want to categorize it. But make sure that there is a catalog, a real catalog that you always keep in print, that you always maintain, and that you ceaselessly promote of really good stuff. Then when people have their own ideas of what they like, sure, turn them loose on the garbage dump and let them pick through the piles of rubble to find the things that they want to find. That's fine. But initially, at least, there has to be focus. There has to be an organization. And even Apple Music and those people who've just gotten started, they still don't know how to do it. They really don't. I mean, they're scattershot. It's throw the crap against the wall and see what sticks. And there's no real focus. One of the things that I learned in my peregrination through the world of classical music from Wilma Cozart Fine, the genius, really, behind Mercury Living Presence, was what she always insisted. She said, we had a catalog. We built a catalog. It had an identity. It had a focus. It had its artists. It had its... And she was so right. Because you knew you were getting a certain quality image. You were getting a certain philosophy. You were getting a certain comprehensiveness. I mean, all of those things, which none of these people are trying to do, they are all overwhelmed by the sheer quantity of stuff. It's a landfill. It's a garbage dump. It's overwhelming everybody who tries to get their arms or their brains or their marketing macho around it. And I don't know what the solution is, but I don't know about you, but looking at Amazon, it's just horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. They suck. They have completely, between them and the industry, they have gone down the crapper when it comes to classical music. Of course, they don't care anymore about classical music because they sell everything else. They sell vacuum cleaners and toasters and toilet paper and groceries and medical insurance and drugs and stuff, So what do they care about this? Obviously not very much. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.